It had been exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days since Henry Whitmore had lost the love of his life, Margaret. The days blurred together now, marked only by the soft chime of the antique grandfather clock in his hallway and the occasional chirp of birds outside the Victorian windowpanes. At 73, Henry had long retired from his career as an English professor and now spent his days wandering the empty rooms of the house that once echoed with laughter, music, and the scent of Margaret's homemade bread. The only living soul that came and went with any consistency was Elena, the maid who had been coming in thrice a week to keep the place clean. Quiet, punctual, and efficient, she never overstayed, never spoke unnecessarily, and always bowed her head respectfully as she passed Henry in the hallway. Henry noticed her limping for the first time on a rainy Wednesday morning in late October. He was seated in his favorite armchair, one Margaret had reupholstered herself decades ago, sipping black coffee and pretending to read a book he couldn't concentrate on. The swish of a mop caught his ear, and out of habit more than curiosity, he looked up. There was Elena, slightly hunched over the mop handle, her left leg dragging subtly behind her with each movement. It was the kind of limp that could go unnoticed if you weren't paying attention, but Henry, who had once prided himself on noticing the subtlest expressions in his students' essays, noticed. She paused, winced, and unconsciously placed her hand over her side as if steadying herself. "Elena," he said softly, and she froze. He hadn't addressed her directly in months. "Are you all right?" She glanced up quickly, startled, her dark eyes wide, almost panicked. "Yes, sir," she replied quickly, nodding. Just a small sprain. Nothing serious." He didn't believe her. Something about the way she gripped the mop, the tension in her jaw, and the slight tremor in her voice, it told a story of something deeper, something carefully concealed. "You should sit down," Henry offered, gesturing toward the armchair across from him. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the break in their usual boundary. "Please," he added gently. She nodded and sat, perching on the edge of the seat like a child caught doing something wrong. Silence settled between them, and Henry let it linger for a while. He had learned that sometimes, silence was the most patient invitation. After a long pause, she spoke, eyes lowered. "I didn't want to lose the job," she whispered. "I thought if you saw me struggling, you might let me go." Henry frowned. "Why would I do that?" She looked up, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Because that's what most people do." He sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm not most people." She looked at him for a moment longer and then, as if a dam had cracked, the truth began to pour out. Elena was a single mother. Her husband had been deported 4 years ago, and she hadn't heard from him since. She worked 3 cleaning jobs to support her 2 children, a 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son, both of whom she rarely saw awake. The limp, it turned out, was from a bad fall she'd taken a week ago while rushing down the subway stairs to make it to work on time. She hadn't gone to a doctor. She couldn't afford it. Henry sat in stunned silence as she spoke. Her voice was steady, not seeking pity but simply stating facts. Her pride was like a thin veil stretched tightly over a lifetime of sacrifice. "I clean because it's honest work," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't steal. I don't beg. I just want to keep my children fed and in school. That's all." Henry's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. Something long buried beneath grief and loneliness. Compassion. And a strange sense of guilt. After she left that day, refusing the cash he tried to press into her hand, Henry sat in that same chair and wept. Not just for her, but for Margaret. For the years they'd had, the security they never had to question, the love that had cocooned them through storms. And now, in the quiet of his own empty house, he was seeing another life running parallel to his, one of struggle, perseverance, and silent heroism. That night, Henry made a decision. The next morning, he made a few calls. It wasn't difficult. He still had connections. Within a week, he had arranged for Elena's children to be enrolled in a local after-school program. A family doctor, a former student of his, agreed to treat her injury pro bono. He even called a friend who ran a small cleaning business and secured her a supervisor position, one that paid double what she was earning cleaning homes individually. But he didn't stop there. Elena returned 2 weeks later, her limp nearly gone, her cheeks slightly fuller, her eyes brighter. She knocked hesitantly on his door, unsure why he had summoned her again. This time, Henry greeted her at the door himself, a warm smile replacing his usual distant nod. "I'd like to offer you a different kind of job," he said. She blinked. "Sir. I don't need a maid anymore," he continued. "What I need is a house manager. Someone to oversee the home, help with errands, maybe even help with organizing a few community events I've been thinking of starting." She looked confused. "But I don't have experience in—" "You have life experience," he interrupted kindly. "And integrity. That's enough for me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, nodding. "Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." "Henry," he corrected, smiling. "Call me Henry." From that day forward, the house slowly began to breathe again. Elena started arriving with her children on weekends. Henry taught them chess and helped with their schoolwork. He rediscovered laughter. He found joy in the chaos of spilled juice and little feet pattering across the floor. The walls that once echoed with silence were now filled with giggles, conversations, and the sound of life returning. Months passed, and one sunny afternoon, Henry stood in the backyard, watching Elena's daughter chase butterflies with a net. Elena joined him, standing close, their arms nearly brushing. "You saved us," she said softly. Henry shook his head. "You saved me," he replied. "I was just a man waiting to die quietly. You reminded me there's still life worth living." They stood in silence again, but this time it was warm, companionable. The kind of silence that needed no words. A few months later, Henry did something he never thought he'd do again. He started a foundation in Margaret's name, one that provided support for single mothers like Elena. With Elena as his right hand, they helped dozens of families find jobs, shelter, and a future. He even opened up his home as a community center on weekends, with free classes, meals, and storytelling sessions. His grief didn't vanish. But it softened. It found a place beside purpose. And in that space, something beautiful blossomed. Because sometimes, all it takes is a limp, a small, unnoticed pain, to awaken a heart numbed by loss. And sometimes, the ones we think we are helping, are the very ones sent to save us. The end.